Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. I hope you've all had a happy Monday and a great start to your weeks. Today, we're going to be diving into our daily cryptocurrency market update, and we're really going to be focusing on the kind of macroeconomic landscape at the moment, as it is weighing very heavily upon the crypto space's shoulders. We're going to be doing a number of other things within this video, going over some articles looking at geopolitical events and how they're kind of unfolding, talking about a number of things. We're going to look at crypto, and we're going to also look at tech stocks such as Facebook, such as Netflix, such as the Nasdaq, which are all having a bit of a bad time at the moment. And the reason, this ties in very nicely with what we're saying about markets being very correlated at the moment. And it's all to do with what's taking place with the Federal Reserve, what their new regime may or may not look like in terms of their interest rate hikes that they are going to do in March. The real debate at the moment is whether it will be by 25 basis points or 50. Also looking at geopolitical events, we've got some progression on the kind of Russia-Ukraine situation. This is, there's a lot taking place, and to think that crypto escapes that is ludicrous. Crypto saw a huge beneficiary of March 2020 and what governments had to do in terms of inflating the money supplies, and there is a cooling off of that has to be weighed into markets. And trying to weigh that in and time, when it's been weighed in and when it hasn't, where there's things that have been overvalued or undervalued, is a lot harder than it sounds. So we'll get into it all in this video. It was a bit of a brutal weekend for the cryptocurrency market, and that bleed out has continued into Monday. The FTSE, the UK stock market, is open, not the US one just yet, but we've seen a sort of spill to the downside. A lot of indecision here. People are still undecisive. Lots of people waiting and sat on the sidelines for what the Federal Reserve is going to do and how this is, and they're going to kind of wait and see how this plays out in regards to markets and then maybe reallocate after. But you've got a lot of people that have taken risk off the table, and crypto being still deemed very risky and speculative, it gets hit extremely hard. There isn't a liquidity there also. So Bitcoin's in this kind of range. Essentially, Bitcoin's been going sideways for a year. I mean, you were at this point pretty much at the start of last year. I would argue that given everything that's taken place, it's actually holding up relatively well in comparison with the likes of Facebook. We'll put this on a weekly chart quickly. Facebook, I mean, we think crypto is volatile. Look at that spill for Facebook. This had a lot to do with their earnings and a number of other things, but also the Nasdaq, which is more of a basket case, if you will, of these kind of tech stocks. There's a lot of tech involved within the Nasdaq, is seeing a pullback. And it hasn't seen a pullback of this severity really since March 2020. So it's significant. And this is all really on the back end of the Federal Reserve, and then going, right, we're going to stop or certainly tighten stimulating the economy so that these things, March 2020, just like it was a significant event in Bitcoin, it was a significant event across all assets because it allowed a lot of money to flow into these assets. Sometimes as a hedge, sometimes there's other reasons, and they benefited greatly. And now there is a tightening of that, if you will. So to think that it had an effect to the upside, it will also have an effect to the downside. It's very correlated. We also got Netflix. I'll move this to the daily, or to the weekly, sorry, which saw an absolute spiller. And like I say, the worst spiller since sort of March 2020, which is over here. In fact, a worse spiller than March 2020. So there's a lot taking place right now, and our market is absolutely not immune to it. I mean, you can see Netflix saw a significant spill, but they've got a number of underlying reasons. But the reason I bring this up, and this article talks about it, is really because, can Bitcoin break out versus tech stocks? Nasdaq decoupling paints 100K target. So right now we're correlated, and the reason being is because a lot of the liquidity that goes into tech stocks is also involved within the crypto space. So you have a lot of the same actors at place that are bringing risk off the table now in these risky environments. Are we decoupling from that? Are we going to see growth and continuation when other things that are perhaps more tethered to stimulus and so on and so forth, certainly within the US, sort of cease? Remember, there isn't just a US story for Bitcoin and crypto, it's global, whereas a lot of these stocks within the US, a lot of these tech stocks are very US dependent and dependent largely on a lot of the stimulus and the money regime that is or isn't at play. So it has been brutal. I think everybody, like I say, is just waiting to see what happens. We've got this kind of Russia-Ukraine situation, which we're still unsure what the outcome of that is going to be. There's more than 2 or 3 narratives being thrown around about this. I'm not really sure what to believe. I would like to think that it doesn't escalate to a war. That's my bias. However, I could be proven wrong. But there is progress being made all the time, and so far nobody's really made the first move. There's lots of I know there's currently rebels within the Ukraine that are kind of trying to flare things up, but there's not been an official stance taken by any of the real two governments or governments involved to advance things just yet. So this is one. Can Bitcoin break out versus US tech stocks again and decouple? So right now it's very coupled. We're seeing a drawdown within your tech stocks. It's also a drawdown within crypto, but it's actually held up relatively well in comparison to your tech stocks, certainly recently. But will this decouple? Will we see further growth and continuation as crypto sees its adoption continue? There is a lot of fundamental drivers for Bitcoin, really given just how early it is in terms of adoption, how much adoption there is to come, that don't exist within the tech stocks. A lot of them have kind of seen their peak in terms of users and so on and so forth, whereas Bitcoin is nowhere near that. And that, in my opinion, you guys know I'm ultimately expecting this to continue. I don't think we enter a 2-year sort of prolonged bear market like the 4-year cycle would have us previously believe. I don't think that plays out anymore. I think this could have been the last cycle. I think the space has just matured. Could be wrong, but ultimately my hunch is I'm happy to hodl through this. I'm happy to accumulate at these levels, expecting that continuation. I'm a dip buyer at the end of the day because I believe in this technology and the route that it's taking. The likes of Intel. We also, specifically in regards to the crypto space, have the Biden administration coming out and looking to regulate crypto or build a regulatory framework around it. Now, people are putting a lot of pressure on this, more negative pressure than positive. But I would argue you've got Coinbase, for example, that are going to double their workforce. You've got the likes of BlackRock getting involved with crypto. You've got the likes of Fidelity. You've got the likes of all these big asset managers all looking to get involved with crypto. Would they be doing that at such a pinnacle point? These guys are probably in the most know about what regulatory clarity is going to look like, as they're very lawyered up and so on and so forth. Would they be launching this and moving to adopt crypto knowing that the US was going to ban it? I would argue that they, or come out negatively against it. I'd argue that they wouldn't be. This is Intel unveil 2nd gen Bonanza mine chip for efficient Bitcoin mining. The likes of Intel stepping in. Countries all over the world, guys, are adopting not just Bitcoin, but crypto. The future of finance. US bank partners with crypto custodian. We know that Warren Buffett placed a $1 billion bet within a cryptocurrency bank. I think it was in Rio in Brazil, or a cryptocurrency friendly bank. So there's still lots of players all moving towards capitalizing on this crypto gold rush that I think we are still in. I think there's just turbulence within that. And that has largely come from your kind of macroeconomic events that are taking place or not taking place. Now, there's lots of people on the sideline. One reason I'm so bullish on the crypto space, I think once the direction is firmly established, let's say you start getting back above these sort of previous highs, which isn't that far away, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. We've come a long way. You're going to see people absolutely FOMOing into this market as they're worried they're going to miss the next train. This is another interesting one. We've often speculated that your banks end up becoming cryptocurrency institutions or end up offering crypto services in the same way your crypto services are now offering banking services. It's a kind of shift that's coming. And the reason being is because people want to capitalize off this. There's a lot of growth to come for crypto. And one thing that makes me so adamant in that is the fact that Wall Street haven't even started to push it yet. And we're seeing more and more stock traded crypto funds or Bitcoin funds launching on not necessarily the US stock market, but stock markets around the world. I think it was a South Korean. They'd launched a Bitcoin product on there. All extremely bullish, all extremely, or all a sign of continuation within this market. Making sense of India's new crypto rules. So we've got a little bit more clarity on what's taking place within India, more around the kind of tax framework and what sort of tax you're going to pay on it. India for a long time came out and they were kind of against crypto, or certainly that's what the media would have you believe. And then they've said, actually, we'll embrace it. We'll just regulate it and tax it. Same thing's taking place in Russia today now. It is interesting. I listened to one of the sanctions that they put on Russia, if they did decide to invade Ukraine, would be to essentially stop them from using the pound and the dollar. That's something the kind of UK and the US have come up with together. Very interesting that they've decided to embrace cryptocurrencies all of a sudden. I mean, there's so many catalysts. When we've got a market like this where you've got more people exiting than entering it, that's how a downtrending market works, essentially. Price is determined at the margin. And like I say, if people want to take risk off the table and they don't want to be, nobody's running into these markets particularly. People like me are accumulating on a regular basis, on a sort of dollar cost average basis, but you haven't got these, there's no FOMO involved. Instead, there's more fear that's weighing it to the downside. But there's so many catalysts that could ignite the crypto flame. a spot ETF, for example, being approved by the SEC. I know the SEC recently went for, I think it was 200 letters or so, and the overwhelming majority are in favor of Grayscale's Bitcoin spot ETF because they're going to convert their trust into an ETF. Once that has the green light, a number of other companies are going to move to do the same thing. We know BlackRock filed for an ETF, so on and so forth. Lots and lots of different companies. This means that those companies have to own Bitcoin to fund the ETF. That's a huge catalyst. And one thing, just like Grayscale started with, Bitcoin, and then they went to Ethereum, and then they now own a basket of altcoins within their trust. That's how the ETF world is going to go as the cryptocurrency space evolves. You're still very early, and that's something to remember. There's going to be turbulent times within that. But I've been here for 5 years. I've been through quite a few turbulent times. I've held through all of them, and it's served me well so far. Doesn't mean it's going to into the future. It's just something that I'm personally doing. I think markets are in a lot of fear right now and reacting rather negatively to them. But ultimately, when you really focus on the fundamentals, you focus on the adoption, you focus on what's being built here, it's a very clear picture, certainly to myself. So this was interesting about India coming out and regulating crypto. It is extremely interesting, like I say, that Russia have actually came out and said, look, we're going to regulate crypto and embrace it rather than fight against it, all around the time that we're kind of in this standoff between the Western world and Russia. Not just the Western world, quite a few of the nations around Russia. So it's extremely interesting what's taking place. It's certainly an interesting time to be alive. We are seeing the likes of your tech stocks get absolutely hammered. Will this continue? These markets are not yet open. So it's going to be very interesting to see what direction these take today. Certainly this is the weekly. We finished on a bit of a low note, if you will, down here. But it's going to be extremely interesting to see what Facebook does today, what the NASDAQ does today, what the likes of Netflix does today, and so on and so forth. We already know what the FTSE did, the top 100 stocks in the UK. That kind of saw a lot of indecision. Started up here and ended up down here, which is certainly interesting. So that's really all I have for you in this video, guys. If you have enjoyed this content, a like is always appreciated. So is a comment. And remember, there's lots taking place, but the fundamentals for crypto have never been so strong, and that just simply isn't being reflected in the price right now. What is being reflected is the kind of macro economic landscape and how there's a lot of uncertainty attached to it. My ultimate feeling is that the Fed upping interest rates, I think markets have largely priced this in, and I think they can only go so far before they have to kind of retreat on this hawkish bias that they have in regards to sort of constraining inflation. They're never going to constrain inflation. The whole system, we work in a credit system, by the way, guys, and the whole nature of that is that the credit kind of has to keep growing to accommodate everything. And when you see a shrinking of that, that's when we enter sort of recession territory. Very interesting. I was going to cover it in this video, but I thought, got a lot of doom and gloom things happening already. But there was a very interesting article from the World Bank. And the World Bank do reports, and they were saying, look, there's quite a few people defaulting on their loans right now. And if interest rates kind of go up, that's going to be even more. And the issue that we've got is we live in a very, very leveraged world. And what I mean by that is the entire world is it's kind of like dominoes stacked up against one another. When one falls, a lot will fall. And the World Bank, for example, which lend money to the world in the form of projects and so on and so forth, people don't understand when the likes of, Chile, for example, not Chile, let's use Venezuela, fail on their loans and their loan repayments on some of these loans lent out by the likes of the World Bank. People don't understand how that affects them. Well, it affects everything in the sense that the whole world is leveraged. And how, for example, the World Bank is leveraged is when they essentially make money or issue money in the form of a loan to a country or a project, they'll create a bond on the back end of that. The biggest buyers, or one of the biggest buyers of bonds, are pension funds. So grandpa and grandma who put money into a pension every week or month or whatever it is, don't realize they have direct exposure to how well Chile's economy is or isn't doing. So it's a very, very leveraged. Chile's just one example, or Venezuela. But anyway, I'm rambling on, guys. I'm going to love and leave you on that note. Enjoy your Mondays, and hopefully I'll catch you all in the next YouTube video. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gents.